We have a crisis in the world, tremendous crisis, and also crisis in our consciousness, in us. I see the urgency of change, radical revolution, mutation in the mind. I see it. It is necessary. There is complete quietness of the mind, and that which is silent has vast space. Only then that which is nameless comes into being.
This is Urgency of Change, the Krishnamurti Podcast. It is one of the most marvellous things in life to discover something unexpectedly, spontaneously, without premeditation, without preparing. To come upon it instantly and see the beauty of it, the sacredness of it, the reality of it. Hello and welcome to episode 287 of Urgency of Change. The Krishnamurti Podcast features carefully selected extracts from Krishnamurti's recorded talks. Each episode highlights his different approaches to universal and timeless themes that affect our everyday lives, the state of the world, and the future of humanity. This episode's theme is discovery. Upcoming themes are suffering, communication, and flowering. This is a podcast from Krishnamurti Foundation Trust, based at Brockwood Park in the UK, which is also home to the Krishnamurti Centre. The centre offers a variety of group retreats, including for young adults. There is also a volunteer programme. The atmosphere at the centre is one of openness and friendliness, with a sense of freedom to inquire with others and alone. Please visit krishnamurticentre.org.uk for more information. You can also find our regular Krishnamurti quotes and videos on Instagram, TikTok and Facebook at Krishnamurti Foundation Trust. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review or rating on your podcast app. This episode on discovery has 3 sections. This first extract is from Krishnamurti's third talk at Brockwood Park in 1970 and is titled Discovering Our Conditioning.
Please, if I may suggest, bear in mind that the words and the description are not the thing and the described. The words are necessary as a means of communication. And description and explanations are merely an indication of what is. But if one doesn't actually observe and discover for oneself, then mere piling up of words have very little meaning. If one is at all serious, and you apparently must be serious to have travelled all this distance in a damp climate like this, not south of France or Italy or Spain. If we are at all serious, this must be one of the most fundamental questions. Because man, as one observes, in different parts of the world and with a different culture and social morality, is tremendously and very deeply conditioned to think along a certain line, to act, to work, to think. And his whole background is shaped by the past in relation to the present. And he has cultivated a great deal of knowledge. He's had, millions of years of experience. And all this has conditioned him. Education, culture, social morality, propaganda, religion, which is an extension of propaganda, and his own reactions to all these conditioning, which also is the response of another form of conditioning. So if we could go into this question this morning by talking over together, not that one, especially the speaker, has no authority to tell what one should do or not do, but in talking over together over a very serious problem like this, one has to apply, one has to be sufficiently attentive to see the whole significance of this conditioning, how it divides people, not only geographically but nationally, religiously, socially, linguistically. And this division is in itself a tremendous barrier. It breeds conflict. And if one is to live completely at peace and creatively, we'll go into that word peace and creatively presently, if one is to live that way, one must understand this conditioning. This conditioning, which is not only peripheral, superficial, but also very deep. And where the whole structure of this conditioning can be revealed. And when one has discovered it, what is one to do? How is one to go beyond it? So that is the problem. One sees one is conditioned superficially, and if one is attentive, inquiring, observing, one also begins to question whether this conditioning is right through one, or merely at a superficial level and a little deeper, that's all. So we have these two questions. First, to be aware, know, conscious of our conditioning. Whether that conditioning is superficial or profound. If it is profound, how is that? How are the things that are hidden, the conditioning that are deep, to be revealed? And having observed, how is one to go beyond all this conditioning? Now can we go on from there? One observes, one is conditioned. And if one says one can never possibly uncondition the mind, the problem ends. If you start out with a formula that can never be unconditioned, then all inquiry ceases. You've already resisted it, you've already answered it, and the problem there ends. Then you can only further decorate the conditioning. But if one went into this fairly deeply, and one becomes aware of this whole business, what is one to do? How would you answer it? If this was a very, very serious challenge, and not something that you just brush it aside, but something that is vital, tremendously important in one's life, how would you answer it? What would be your response? Please do give little thought to this. Find out how one would react to such a challenge. Because one can see what is happening in the world. It is this division, this separatist conditioning, divisive, destructive, that is creating such havoc in the world. The panthers, all the rest of that's going on, the wars and so on. Now what is one to do? The first question apparently that would arise, at least for me, is the manner of one's observation. How you have discovered this conditioning. Have you discovered it, found it out for yourself, or somebody told you about it? Please, this is really quite important question to answer for oneself. If you have been told about it, and then you say, yes, I am conditioned, then you are responding to a particular pattern. You are responding to a suggestion, to someone points it out to you, it isn't real. It's only a verbal, intellectual concept which you have accepted, with which you agree, which is quite totally different from the discovery of it for oneself. Then it becomes tremendously vital. And you then have the passion to find out the way out of it. I don't know if you see the difference of the two. Someone telling you and discovering it for oneself are two entirely different things. So which is it? Is one aware that one is conditioned because you have inquired, searched, asked, looked into? Then if you have, how have you discovered it? Who has discovered it? Please, who has discovered it? The observer? The examiner? The analyzer? Who, observing, examining, analyzing the whole mess and the madness that's going on in the world, And by observing, he has discovered the structure of this conditioning and the result of it. Then from that arises the question, who is the observer? Who has discovered that he is conditioned? You follow? Are we communicating with each other? By observing what is happening outwardly and inwardly, the conflicts, the wars, the misery, the confusion in oneself and outside of oneself. The outside is part of what one is. I have observed this very closely. All over the world, this thing. And I have discovered that I am conditioned. And I have found the consequence of this conditioning. So there is the observer who has discovered that he is conditioned. Right? The observer, through analysis, through examination, through investigation, has observed that his structure in which he lives is conditioned. Right? Are we going together? Then the question arises, is the observer different from the things which he has examined and discovered, something separate from himself? If it is separate from himself, then again there is a division. And therefore there is conflict. How to overcome this conditioning, how to free oneself from this conditioning, what to do about it. I don't know. And one has to discover whether this division between the observer and the thing observed, or the analyzer and the thing analyzed, are two separate things, two separate movements. As we said, if they are separate, there must be endless conflict between the two, endless struggle to overcome, to suppress, to control, to discipline, to hold, resist, and all that is born from this division. Are they separate? Or the observer is the observed? This is tremendously important to find out for oneself. Because then the whole way we think completely undergoes a change. And this is the most radical discovery. Then the structure of morality, the continuation of knowledge has quite a different meaning. Please, let's talk this over together and find out if you have discovered this for yourself or are being told, whether you are through description have accepted the described as a fact, or you have discovered this for yourself without any outside agency telling you it is so, then it's your discovery. And it releases tremendous energy, which has been wasted in this division between the observer and the observed. Are we moving it together in this? The wastage of energy is the continuation of knowledge in action. We'll go into that. Knowledge which has been gathered by the observer, and the observer uses that knowledge in action. So, action is different from knowledge, the division. And hence, conflict between action and knowledge. And the entity that holds this knowledge, which is essentially the conditioning, is the observer. So, one must discover this basic principle for oneself. Principle, not something fixed. A reality which can never be questioned again. Then, what takes place? What happens to a mind that has discovered this fact, this truth, that all division, outward or inward, induces conflict. And therefore, effort, struggle, and it leads to every form of distortion. Has one discovered this simple fact that the observer is the observed? Psychologically speaking, I observe the tree, but I am not the tree. I can identify myself with the tree. And that identification is part of the reaction of division. Then if I have discovered this, what takes place to the quality of the mind, which has been conditioned by this division as the higher self, the soul, the body, and, the division. What takes place, what happens to the quality of the mind? See, the speaker is doing all the talking, unfortunately. And asking all the questions. What happens to the mind that has been conditioned through tradition, propaganda, through education, culture and society, and the entity that is conditioned, mind that is conditioned, is part of that culture, society, education and so on. What takes place when this fact is unearthed and observed? Then one asks, what is freedom? Because if this discovery doesn't lead to freedom, doesn't open the door to freedom, then it has no meaning. It is just another intellectual feat leading nowhere. But if it is an actual discovery, an actual reality, then there must be freedom.
The second extract is from the second talk in Saanen, 1967, and is titled, Discovery Brings About Energy.
We need a great deal of energy, which is not dependent on any stimulation. If we are dependent on any stimulation, that very stimulation makes the mind dull, not acute, sensitive. The more you take the drug, LSD or other forms of drugs, you may temporarily find enough energy to see things very, very clearly. But one reverts to one's former state, and therefore you are dependent on that drug more and more and more. So all stimulations, whether of the church or of a drink or of a drug or of the speaker, any form of stimulation will inevitably bring about a dependence, and that dependence prevents you from seeing clearly for yourself and therefore having the vital energy. So any form of dependence on any stimulation is lessening of the quickness, vitality of the mind. And we all depend, unfortunately, on something. It may be on a relationship, or reading an intellectual book, or having formulated certain ideas and ideologies. or seeking various forms of solitude, isolation, denial, resistances. These obviously distort and dissipate energy. So one has to become aware on what one is dependent. So one has to find out why one depends on anything at all, psychologically. I don't mean technologically or depending on the milkman. But psychologically, why do we depend? What is involved in dependence? Because we are investigating together this question of what dissipates, deteriorates, distorts energy. And that energy which we need so vitally to understand the many problems. So, what is it on which we depend? Whether it's a person, a book, a church, a priest, an ideology, or a drink or a drug, various forms which each one of us has, subtly or very obviously. Why do we depend? And what is why this urge to depend? Please, I hope we are taking the journey together. You are not waiting for me to tell you the causes of your dependence, but rather, in inquiring together, we will both discover. And therefore, that discovery will be yours. And hence, being yours, it will give you vitality. Does the cause of a dependence free the mind from dependence? You understand my question? I discover for myself I depend on something, an audience, which will stimulate me. And therefore, I need that audience. Please follow this. I derive from the audience, addressing a large group of people, a kind of energy. And therefore, I depend on that audience, on the people. Whether they agree or disagree. The more they disagree, the more vitality one has. Then there's a battle. But if the audience agrees, then it becomes a very empty, shallow thing. So I depend. Why? My question is, by discovering the cause of my dependence, will I be free of that dependence? Go into it slowly with me, please. That is, I discover that I need an audience, because it's a very stimulating thing to address people. Now, why? Why do I depend? Because in myself I am shallow. In myself I have nothing. In myself I have no source, which is always full, rich, vital, which is moving, living. In myself I'm enormously poor. So I depend. I have discovered that, the cause. Now, will the discovery of the cause free the mind from being dependent? You're following this? I hope. Or the cause, the discovery of the cause is merely intellectual. It is not a discovery. It's merely a discovery of a formula. Right? It's an intellectual investigation, and the intellect has found the cause which makes the mind dependent. Now, the discovery of that cause through the intellect, through rationalization, through analysis, will that free the mind from being dependent? Obviously it doesn't. Right? So the mere intellectual discovery of a cause does not free the mind from being dependent on something which will give it a stimulation. Nor a mere intellectual acceptance of an idea or an emotional acquiescence to an ideology. So what frees the mind from dependence is seeing the totality of this whole structure. The whole structure of stimulation, dependence, seeing that mere intellectual discovery of a cause of dependence does not free the mind from dependence, seeing the total structure. Seeing the whole structure and nature of stimulation and dependence, and how that dependence makes the mind stupid, dull, inactive, seeing the totality of it alone frees the mind. Right? Can we proceed from there? Anasto, madam, anasto. No. Do I see a part of the picture, a detail, or do I see the whole picture? This is very important to ask ourselves, because we see things in fragments. Right? Because we think in fragments, and all thinking is in fragments. So I must inquire into the nature of what it means to see totally. You understand? Can my mind, please follow this, which has always functioned in fragments, as a nationalist, as an individualist, as the collective, as the Catholic, as German, Russian, French, or as an individual caught in a technological society, functioning in a specialized activity, and so on and on and on. Everything broken up in fragments. The good opposed to the evil, hate and love, anxiety and freedom. Always thinking in duality, in comparison, in competition, in comparing. So such a mind, functioning in fragments, cannot see the whole. I mean, if I, as a Hindu, I'm not a Hindu, or an Indian, which I'm not, if I look at the world from my little window as the Hindu, believing in certain dogmas, rituals, traditions, brought up in a certain culture and so on and on and on, obviously I don't see the whole of man, of mankind. So, to see something totally, whether it is a tree or a cloud or my relationship or any activity that I do, to see the totality of something, the mind must be free from all fragmentation. And the very nature of fragmentation is the center from which I am looking. Are you following all this? The background, the culture, as the Catholic, as the Protestant, as the communist, as the socialist, as my family opposed. You follow? So as long as I am looking at life from a particular point of view, or from a particular experience which I have cherished, which I have gathered, which I have stored up, which is my background, which is the me, I cannot see the totality. Then it's not a question of how am I to get rid of fragmentations. I hope you're following this. Our invariable question would be, how am I, who function in fragments, not to function in fragments? That's a wrong question. So, here I am dependent psychologically on so many things. And I have discovered intellectually, verbally, through analysis, I have discovered the cause of my dependence. The discovery is fragmentary, right? Because it is an intellectual, verbal, analytical process. And therefore it is always fragmentary, which means whatever thought investigates must inevitably be fragmentary. Right? So I can see the totality of something only when thought doesn't interfere. I see, not verbally, not intellectually, but the fact, as I see the fact of this microphone, without any like or dislike, there it is. So I see actually what is, that I am dependent. I do not want to get rid of that dependence, or to be free of the cause of that dependence. I observe. And I observe without any center, without any structure or the nature of thinking. I don't know if you're following me. So, when I observe that way, when there is an observation of that kind, I see the whole picture, not a fragment of that whole picture. So when the mind sees the whole picture, then it is free of it. Now, I have discovered two things. That there is a dissipation of energy when there is a fragmentation, right? Is this all becoming rather too complex? Tant pis. I have discovered by looking, by observing, by listening to this whole structure of dependence, I have discovered that any activity of fragmentation is as a Hindu, as a communist, as a Catholic, or as the analyzer analyzing, which is still fragmentation. Any activity of a mind that works, functions in fragments, is essentially a dissipated mind, a mind that wastes energy. Right? I have discovered that. Therefore, that discovery gives me energy to face any fragments that may arise. And therefore, as I observe as fragments arise, there is a dissolving of them. I'm afraid I'm doing all the work. So I have found the very source of dissipation of energy. That any fragment, any fragmentation, any division, and division means conflict. You following? Any conflict is waste of energy, right? And I think there is no waste of energy if I imitate. If I accept authority. If I depend on the priest, on the ritual, on the dogma, on the party, on an ideology. Because there I accept and follow. But the following and the acceptance of an ideology, whether it's good or bad, whether it's holy or unholy, is a fragmentary activity. And therefore it causes conflict. And any conflict which will inevitably arise as long as there is a division between what is and what should be, any conflict is a dissipation of energy. All right? And can one see the truth of this? Not how to be free of conflict. If you put that question to yourself, how am I to be free from conflict? Then you are creating another problem. And hence you are increasing conflict. Whereas if you see, as you would see the microphone clearly, directly, then you would understand essentially the truth of a life in which there is no conflict at all.
The third and final extract in this episode is from Krishnamurti's 10th talk in Saanen in 1965 and is titled Discovering the Sacred.
You know, it's one of the most marvelous things in life to discover something unexpectedly, spontaneously, without premeditation, without preparing, to come upon something instantly and see the beauty of it, the sacredness of it, the reality of it. But a mind that is seeking, wanting to find, is never in that position at all. And love is not a thing to be cultivated. Love, like humility, cannot be put together. It's only the vain man that attempts to be humble. The proud man that seeks to put away his pride through humility. But that act is still vanity. So there must be this quality of humility to listen and therefore to learn. And a mind that has understood this nature of humility never follows, never obeys. How can that which is completely negative, empty, obey anything, follow anything? So, a mind that has, out of this clarity, knows what love is, then it must also be aware of the nature and the structure of death. Because if we don't die to everything of yesterday, to the past, then the mind is still caught in the shadows, in the memories, in the longings, in the conditioning of a human mind. So there is no clarity. And to die to yesterday easily, voluntarily, without justification, without argument, demands energy. And argument, justification, choice is waste of energy. And therefore one never dies to the many yesterdays so that the mind can be made fresh, anew. And when there is clarity, then there follows of love with its gentleness, a quality of humility. And there comes also this freedom from the past through death. And out of this comes creation. Not self-expression, which is called creation. Not putting paint together on a piece of canvas, or writing few words or many words in a book, or in the kitchen making bread, or conceiving a child. That's not creation. There is creation when there is love and death, and a mind that does not know creation, and that creation can only come when it is dying every day to everything, so that there is no accumulation as memory. Obviously there must be little accumulation of your clothes, house and property. I'm not talking about that. But the inward sense of accumulation, possession, and from which possession there is domination, authority, conformity, obedience. And such a mind is not a free mind. It's only the free mind which has known what death is and what love is. To that mind alone there is creation. And in this state, the mind is religious. In this state, there is sacredness. To me, that word has extraordinary meaning. Please, I'm not doing propaganda for that word. No, trying to convince you, try to make you feel or experience through that word reality. You can't. Unless one has gone through all this. non-verbally, but actually. Actually dying to everything known inside you. Your memories, your remembrances, your pleasures. And when there is no jealousy, nor the torture of despair, no envy, no greed, then you know what love is, and then you will come upon that thing which is called sacred. Therefore, the essence of religion is sacredness. And that once that comes into being, it's like the river. Towns may pollute it if they don't pollute it too much. Like a river that cleanses itself as it goes along. Within a few miles it is again clean, fresh, pure, after a city has polluted it. So once the mind comes upon this sacredness, then every movement, every act is a cleansing act. It's a purified, it is, the mind through that act is making itself innocent. And therefore it's not accumulating. And therefore such a mind which has discovered this sacredness is in constant revolution, not the economic revolution or social revolution, but this revolution which is constantly, endlessly cleansing, purifying itself, and therefore acting, not upon an idea, not based on some formula, but as the river with tremendous volume of water behind it, moves, flows, cleanses itself, so does a mind that has come upon this religious sacredness. You know, unless you hesitate, you can't proceed. It isn't a drive. It is an inquiry, hesitating discovery, step by step. And then you find out for yourself. Then you need follow nobody. Then you need to discuss with no one. Then you need not ask for correction or for confirmation of your discovery. And all that needs a great deal of intelligence and sensitivity. You know, it's like talking things over together as two friends. Neither asserting, neither trying to dominate the other. Each talking easily, affably, in a sense of friendly companionship to discover. Then with that state of mind we do discover. And I assure you, what you discover is very, very little. What you discover has very little importance. But it is important to discover. after discovering, keep going. What is detrimental is to stay with what you have discovered. And then your mind is dead, finished. But if what you have discovered you die to, the moment you discover it, then you can flow like this stream, like a river that has abundance of water.